3 individuals claiming to have witnessed UFOs are testifying in an historic hearing on Capitol Hill today.
The witnesses detailed some of the unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs, those experiences that they've claimed to have seen to a House Oversight Committee.
Now, the 3 men testifying include former Intel officer David Grush and 2 former Navy pilots, David Fravor and Ryan Graves. Graves opened up the testimony by adamantly claiming there is a significant number of unreported UAPs in our airspace right now.
As we convene here, UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. These sightings are not rare or isolated, they are routine. Military aircrew and commercial pilots, trained observers whose lives depend on accurate identification, are frequently witnessing these phenomena.
David Kipping now. He's an associate professor of astronomy at Columbia and director of the Cool Worlds Lab. That's a nice name. So, David, tell us, first of all, let's just rewind a little bit. I grew up saying UFOs. We hear UAPs. What's the difference, and what are some of your takeaways from today's hearing?
UAPs is really just a rebranding, right? Unidentified flying object is now an unidentified aerial phenomenon. It's just a change in the name. But I think that's to try and get around some of the stigma. I think pilots had some concern about maybe reporting the idea of seeing a UFO in the past. UAP has maybe lowered that. And I think what we're seeing in Congress today of this becoming more and more mainstream is making it easier. It's reducing that impetus, that barrier for pilots to eventually report things that they see.
And apparently there's been an increase in the number of reported UAP sightings. What's fascinating to me is that the testimony often comes from pilots and folks in the military. And sometimes there are foreign governments testing out their own technology that make it unidentified. But why do you think, and we all have our own cell phones and technology to record what's happening, why do you think we're seeing this uptick?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's greater camera technology now than we've ever had before. If you add up the number of hours that pilots are in the air in the US military, it's huge. It's something like 5 to 6 million hours per year. So even if 1 in every 10,000 of those hours that they're flying, they see something spurious, see something strange that they can't identify, that would still lead to over 500 strange reports every year. So it's quite possible just the increase in our ability to observe the sky is leading to this increase. But also I think there's a psychological reinforcement effect. I mean, if you go to Iceland, over half of Icelanders believe in elves and fairies, whereas in the US, it's over half of Americans believe in aliens. So, you know, this is kind of a cultural thing. If you see something strange that you can't quite explain, what does your brain inject as the explanation? And for us, we're kind of preconditioned on the idea of aliens in this country and many other countries that we tend to put aliens into that gap. And I think that may be what's happening in many of these claims of alien activity.
Well, that's a statistic I did not know, that half of Americans believe in aliens. David, I'm also interested in something else that came out of this hearing. The witnesses believe that there should be a central reporting system on UAPs. I was actually struck by the fact that there isn't one. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, I think it could certainly be useful to have a single source to collect this data in a uniform way. I guess the problem as a scientist, looking at it objectively, is that it's not so much the quantity of data that we're collecting that really matters, but the quality. So if I was going to look again at these pilots collecting these reports, how do I evaluate the error rate of those pilots? It's no good giving me, you know, loads of junk data where there's an extremely high error rate. I only want the very best, highest quality data with well-defined, quantifiable uncertainties and measurements. And so just merely having a huge data dump probably isn't enough. I would hope that there'd be a lot of vetting and quality calibration into what ultimately goes into that.
It's incredible. We're showing just some of the footage of these UAPs. One of them is like this sphere that seems to be moving at its own speed through space and time. And it's interesting you say that we kind of fill the gap maybe with what we want, whether that's fairies, elves, or aliens. Talk to me, though, about the stigma. Because if you go back to the 1950s, those who reported seeing a UFO in New Mexico or in Nevada, you know, were described as people with tin hats and conspiracy theorists. Has that changed? Are we more accepting now or not so much?
Oh, definitely. I think so. I mean, certainly as an astronomer, we are talking about UFOs and UAPs in academic circles, right? Which is unthinkable even 5-10 years ago. So what's happening in, with Congress today is just the tip of the iceberg of a shift that has been happening culturally in our ability to talk about this. And frankly, as someone who looks for life in the universe as an astronomer, this is great, because what I used to do and still do is to look for life around other planets. That was considered a kind of fringe and out there. And so, if we're looking for UFOs and UAPs now, and that's considered mainstream, then what I'm doing is considered like really safe. It used to be very hard to get the government to fund searches for alien life. So we've kind of shifted the window of what's normal in a sense. And so as an astronomer, I'm kind of all for it. It's great that we are able to seriously do this undertaking of asking one of the most fundamental questions about our existence: are we alone?
I think I'm all for it too. David, do you believe life is visiting us from other worlds?
I would need a lot more evidence of what I've seen so far. I put it that way. I'm open-minded to it, but I'm skeptical of what I've seen so far. I was really hoping someone at these Congress hearings today would present us with hard, firm evidence, and that didn't happen. It's still just testimony at this point and some grainy videos. I want to see a piece of technology or biological sample, something that would be incontrovertible, and we're still waiting for that.
A great point. My position is, if life forms are advanced enough to get to Earth and see what we're up to, they'd be smart enough to hide. If you see what we do on this planet.
They seem to crash a lot as well.
Yeah. Well, great to chat with you about this. Really fascinating, David.